The conventional wisdom is we shut down after midnight, and I'm assuming you don't see a way around it. What comes after the shutdown?
Well, unfortunately, it looks like we are barreling towards a shutdown because Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer have changed their position entirely on keeping the government funded and passing clean CRs. Whether it was Joe Biden or Donald Trump, I have voted for every single CR to keep the government open and funded while we negotiate a final appropriations package. I think it is foolish to shut down the government. It is going to create chaos in the markets. It will create chaos for the American people, especially those who rely on the social safety net, border security, our military, veterans benefits, et cetera. This is entirely unnecessary and does nothing to actually further the work of the American people. It is pure political posturing by my Democratic colleagues because they are not in the majority. And from my vantage point, that is not what you do. I was against it when Republicans wanted to shut down the government, and I'm against it here when Democrats want to do it. So we will see what happens over these 12 hours. As you pointed out, Republicans passed a clean CR through the House. The bill is sitting in the Senate at the desk. It can easily be taken back up right now and passed. And Chuck Schumer refuses to do that, despite his many pronouncements in years past about the need to pass clean CRs and not pound your fist and stomp your feet when you don't get your way.
So, Congressman, I hear you on the future of a potential clean CR, but do you see any room for negotiations here when it does come to those expiring Obamacare tax credits? We did hear from House Speaker Mike Johnson in an interview this morning saying that there might be some negotiating room, but that would have to happen after a funding bill is passed, since the tax credits are going to expire by the end of the year.
Correct. And I am one of several Republican members who have signed on to legislation to extend the ACA subsidies for a year. Remember, these were put in place during COVID to try and help those who were losing their jobs or unemployed because the government was forcing businesses to shut down. We don't want people to be unduly hurt, obviously, by health care premium increases. But to try and shut the government down while negotiating some of these issues is foolish. We can easily keep the government funded through November 21st, finalize all appropriations for fiscal year 26, and come to an agreement on these ACA subsidies for the next year or two. There's no reason to shut the government down in the middle of those negotiations.
You wonder what would happen if Mike Johnson said exactly what you just said, although maybe there's so little trust it doesn't matter right now, Congressman. But what should come of these after? We've been talking about these extensions for some time now. Everybody's become an expert on this, or so they think. If this was a COVID-era policy, should it be extended forever, as Democrats suggest? You just pointed out a year. Should they come down? Should there be a gradual phasing out? What's the long term on this?
Well, I think, again, this is a negotiation and a discussion to be had. I think many Republicans would like to see an income limit, on these subsidies. Again, these were put in place during COVID. I think there's a larger point, though, which is if the Affordable Care Act was supposed to reduce health care premiums, was supposed to increase access, why is it not working as intended 15 years later, so much so that you need these subsidies to help people? Obviously, there's a broader issue with health insurance cost in this country, and I think that is something that Republicans and Democrats should work on together to focus on how we reduce overall costs. You saw the president today with the announcement with respect to Pfizer and certain prescription drugs and being able to purchase them at a much lower rate. That's important. When you look at the challenges facing the U.S. and Europe, part of the problem with prescription drug costs in America is that Americans are subsidizing Europeans with the price controls that have long been put in place on prescription drugs in Europe. So that is something that we should all embrace, reducing overall cost. But that's not something that you shut the government down over and really harm the very people that you're trying to help.
Well, sticking with this idea that higher drug costs are a main a political point on both sides of the aisle, I also want to ask you about some of the economic impacts here of a potential shutdown. You said, of course, on House Fin Services, our analysts at Bloomberg Economics estimate that the unemployment rate could reach 4.7% in a shutdown. I'm wondering, are the optics going to be difficult to navigate here, considering there's already concerns about the labor market? How are Republicans going to message around this when we know that economic impacts could really be one of those top concerns and priorities?
Well, we've seen in shutdowns prior, for instance, the stock market has generally grown. The biggest concern has been on GDP. We saw for Q2 revision a 3.8% growth in GDP, which far exceeded what many prognosticators were claiming was going to happen in Q2. So, certainly the economy is moving in the right direction. We got the tax package across the finish line. That was critical for tax certainty. We don't need a government shutdown to create unnecessary chaos as we are working to enact critical policies that move the economy in the right direction, that create jobs, that create wealth and opportunity. And so, look, unemployment obviously is a critical issue. We don't want to see layoffs. We don't want to see uncertainty in the market. Democrats have said for years, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, long on record about the impacts of a government shutdown and the need for a clean CR. They should look in the mirror, listen to their words of years past, including just last year with Joe Biden at the helm, and vote the right way, which is to pass a clean CR and keep the government funded while we work through all these other issues of concern.
What's your view on the Fed, Congressman, as you sit on the Financial Services Committee, to Tyler's point? If this affects the release of the jobs report, for instance, on Friday, if BLS can't kick out the jobs data, at what point does that become a problem for the Fed to make an accurate decision, say, by the next meeting, when it doesn't have a complete picture of the data? Is this something you're worried about, or you think government will be back open at time?
Well, again, these are all the concerns and considerations that go into a government shutdown, and why I fundamentally believe, regardless of which party is in power, shutting the government down is stupid. It doesn't serve a purpose but for a political one. And in this instance, Democrats are trying to use this for a political purpose, and that is wrong. It was wrong when Republicans wanted to do it in years past. It is wrong now. When you talk about the Fed, look, fundamentally, I believe the Fed has been late to the game, both when they needed to raise interest rates in the past and now in terms of reducing interest rates. I think they need to cut interest rates far greater than they have. Obviously, having all of the data and information is important. But I think all of us recognize the need for them to cut rates. So whether or not they have that data, they need to act on the reality of the situation. Jerome Powell needs to advance rate cuts in a serious way so that we can continue to move this economy in the right direction.
Well, we heard from President Trump this morning saying that there could be, quote, a lot, in his words, of firings amid this shutdown. We know the OMB was circulating this memo threatening permanent layoffs. Do you agree with this as what seems to be emerging as a negotiating tactic between the White House and Democrats on the Hill?
Look, I said earlier in the week when that memo came out that I don't agree with permanent layoffs. But this is the challenge when you have a shutdown. The executive will make determinations as to who's essential, who is not, restructuring of departments and agencies based on a lack of funding. And I think if Democrats are so concerned about what they see as excessive executive overreach, then they shouldn't be playing games here. Pass the clean CR and keep the government funded, and then we don't even have to have that discussion. But unfortunately, they are playing games here and changing their previous position. Every single House Democrat, but for one, Jared Golden of Maine, every single House Democrat either didn't vote or voted no on keeping the government funded almost 2 weeks ago.
Do you take the White House quickly, Congressman, at their word when it comes to the layoffs?
Look, I don't think they're kidding around. If they intend to do that, they've made that clear. And again, why play with fire here? There's a very easy way to solve all this. Pass a clean CR and let's keep doing the work of the American people, negotiate a final appropriations deal. What they should be asking for is a top line number from OMB so that we can finalize the appropriations for fiscal year 26. That's what they should be asking for instead of trying to play political games here.